Hey guys, tonight we wander through a day in the life of a medieval woman, from the first pale streaks of dawn to the last flicker of candlelight. You trudge barefoot across cold, uneven stones, the mist curling around the thatched roofs of your village, and realize immediately you probably won't survive this if you expected leisure. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, why not drop your location and local time in the comments while you're at it? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The rooster's crow pierces the silence long before your eyes fully open. Your mattress more straw than comfort is damp with night moisture, and a chill has crept into your bones while you slept. You swing your legs over the side and step down, toes pressing into the cold, uneven floor of your small home. The scent of last night's hearth smoke lingering faintly. Your first task, simple in theory, is to light the fire. In practice, your hands are stiff from sleep and the kindling resists your coaxing. Flint against stone sparks, and you hold your breath as a small flame flickers to life. This flame will warm the house and cook the morning porridge, a humble beginning that carries the weight of survival. Historians still argue whether small handheld bellows or simple wooden blowpipes were more common in rural homes. Tonight, you rely entirely on instinct, fingers aching from the effort. Before the house truly awakens, water must be drawn from the village well. Buckets scrape against stone as you lower and lift them, the coarse rope biting into your palm. In wealthier households, you might have a servant to help. But for most medieval women, drawing water is a daily endurance test. Some unusual guides from the period suggest hollowed-out logs or stretched animal bladders as containers, an early, quirky form of what we might now call reusable bottles. You balance the bucket on your hip, careful not to spill the precious liquid, and glance at the village slowly stirring, smoke curling from neighboring hearths, the occasional shout across the road, dogs yapping in the morning mist. Even before breakfast, the day already hums with life, demanding attention and energy in equal measure. Once the water is inside, the hearth requires tending. You arrange stones and ashes, coaxing the fire into a steady glow, the smell of smoke mixing with damp earth and wood. You poke at the embers with a stick, adding small twigs as necessary, the warmth gradually returning to your fingers. The smell alone is comforting, grounding you before the rush of chores begins. Today, like every day, you will feed the family, prepare for the animals, and attend to the house, all before the sun has climbed high into the sky. Quirky as it sounds, some households even use the soot from the hearth to polish wood or mix with oils for early cosmetics. Reminder that utility often mingled with minor vanity. You move from the fire to the center of the room, stretching muscles stiff from sleep, and notice small signs of the household waking. Chickens scratch at the dirt floor, pecking lazily, while a goat nudges against the doorway, impatient for breakfast. You shoo them gently but firmly, aware that each animal has its own rhythm and stubbornness. Milk from the goat will be needed for cheese or morning porridge, and if you neglect it, the day will feel incomplete. Handling animals requires patience and finesse. Even a slight misstep could result in spilled milk or bruised fingers. Historians still argue whether medieval households prized efficiency over routine, or if much of this care was instinctual and passed down through generations. You, of course, simply act, balancing bucket, stool, and animal without overthinking. The first meal is humble but essential. You prepare a small gruel, a mix of oats or barley with a pinch of salt, occasionally sweetened with honey, if you are lucky. Kneading dough for bread, stirring porridge, and maintaining the fire are tasks that demand constant attention. You breathe in the mingling smells of smoke, grain, and milk, a sensory signature that signals the start of each day. Small children may stumble into the kitchen, hair tousled, eyes wide, eager for food or a brief moment of attention. You hand them bowls with a soft warning not to spill. watching as they dip spoons into the steaming gruel, and you allow a small, indulgent smile. Quirky, yes, but medieval parents sometimes added crushed herbs to children's porridge, both to flavor it and, they hoped, to teach them early medicinal lessons. Outside, the village begins its own routines. The blacksmith sparks steel against iron, the scent of hot metal mingling with smoke from chimneys, while neighbors call greetings across dirt paths. Even as you focus on your hearth, your ears catch the hum of commerce and labor, a chorus of daily life. The world is waking, and each small movement from fetching water to stoking fires fits into a larger rhythm that keeps the village alive. Historians still argue whether these daily rhythms were structured by necessity or evolved from cultural preference. But for you, there is no choice. The day demands participation. You pause briefly, hands dusty from soot and flour, feeling the warmth of the hearth seep into your bones. A cat rubs against your leg, perhaps seeking scraps or simply companionship. Okay, and you scratch behind its ears, grateful for a brief moment of calm. Your eyes flick to the window, noticing the thin light spreading across the village green, dew glittering like tiny jewels on grass. Every step of your morning fire, water, food, animals is interwoven with sensory detail, and yet the repetition is not monotonous. Each day brings slightly different challenges: a stubborn bucket rope, a goat with an unusual mood, or an errant gust of wind that threatens the morning flame. You move back to the hearth to check the fire again, adding a pinch of kindling. The smoke curls lazily, filling the small room with warmth and the subtle, acrid temps of survival. You reflect briefly. Not for long, there is too much to do on the interconnectedness of these early hours. Water, fire, food, animals, people. All must align to keep life flowing. Quirky details from the past surface in your mind, like the occasional medieval suggestion to use crushed crocodile dung as a sunscreen. Thankfully, that particular recommendation has not made it into your daily routine, though you raise an eyebrow at the imagination of past writers. The early dawn, with its mixture of comfort and challenge, teaches patience, resilience, and the intimate knowledge that every small chore is a thread in the tapestry of life. By the time the sun starts to climb and the mist begins to dissipate, your home is slightly warmer. The water is drawn and breakfast is simmering. You wipe your hands on a rough linen cloth, acknowledging the simple triumph of a morning survived, and mentally prepare for the next wave of tasks: milking, feeding, and managing animals. Each motion, each sound, each smell is part of a choreography you follow without conscious thought, honed by years of repetition. As the village awakens fully, you take a moment to inhale deeply, the mingling sense of hearth, earth, and animal filling your lungs, reminding you that this life, though hard, is rich with sensory texture, history, and ritual. The sun climbs higher now, spilling pale gold across the village, and you step into the courtyard, the earth damp beneath your bare feet. The morning's first real labor begins. Milking the goats. Their bleats greet you in a chorus of impatience, demanding attention before you've fully stretched your aching limbs. You grab a small wooden stool and place it beneath the sturdier goat, the plump one with the gentle eyes, and settle yourself into the familiar rhythm of pressing and squeezing. The warm milk fills the wooden pail with a steady plop. Historians still argue whether goats or cows dominated the average medieval household, but in your village, goats are indispensable, providing milk for porridge, cheese, and butter. Already, the responsibility presses against your shoulders, a weight that is equal parts nurturing and survival. The younger goats are less cooperative. One butts the pail with surprising force, knocking the edge and making you curse softly under your breath. You pause, pressing your palm to the animal's head, and mutter a gentle scolding. Medieval manuals sometimes suggested tying stubborn animals to a post with cloth strips. A crude but effective method, yet it feels unnecessary here. Patience, gentle nudges, and whispered coaxing seem to do the trick. You hum a soft tune as your fingers work, feeling the rhythm seep into your bones. Nearby, chickens scratch at the dirt, pecking for insects and seeds, their feathers brushing against your ankles, reminding you that multitasking is both art and necessity. In a single breath, you manage goat, pale stool, and the occasional clumsy chick darting too close to the edge. You think, not for the first time, that medieval women probably had more simultaneous jobs than a modern smartphone can track. Milk drawn, you rinse the pail in a shallow trough outside, the water biting against your palm with cold morning freshness. A neighbor appears, carrying a small basket of herbs, and you exchange greetings. Brief updates on the weather and news of the northern fields recently flooded from early rains. Quirky but true. Some women crushed herbs into the milk, believing it strengthened children's immunity or protected against minor ailments. The boundary between superstition and practical wisdom is narrow, and you navigate it naturally, incorporating small rituals without much thought, because they work in the rhythm of daily life. Historians still argue whether these little habits had measurable benefit, but you care more about immediate results. Calm animals, nourish children, and enough milk to last through the morning. Next, the chickens demand attention. You bend low, gathering a clutch of eggs, feeling the warmth radiate from the small shells. One hen hisses, fluffs feathers, and pecks at your fingers, a warning you heed, adjusting your grip. The smell of hay and fresh earth fills your nose, grounding you as the pail fills. Eggs are precious, both for immediate consumption and for barter or market sale, so care is paramount. You glance toward the pig pen, the pigs snorting, rooting through the mud, eager for scraps. Feeding them requires a precise balance. Too much, and they'll be sluggish. Too little, and they'll forage destructively. You toss them a handful of leftovers from yesterday's meal. Watching them scramble and grunt, and a small smile crosses your lips. Quirky, but true. Some households added crushed acorns or herbs to pig feed to improve flavor or supposedly enhance meat quality. You shake your head with a quiet laugh at the odd but enduring wisdom passed down through generations. The mid-morning sun warms your back, sweat dampening the linen at your shoulders. Your routine is relentless. You sweep a small patch of courtyard dirt to prevent mud from spreading. Chase a wandering goat back to the pen and rearrange fencing that has sagged overnight. A sudden breeze brings the scent of wildflowers and smoke from neighboring hearths, and you pause for a breath, letting the textures of sound, smell, and motion fill your senses. Your hands ache from kneeling and lifting, yet the work is meditative, a tactile meditation that roots you firmly in the now. Some women in other villages have been known to talk to their animals during these chores, murmuring soft reassurances or even small songs. You found that a whispered word and calm presence often do more than a stick or tie. And you hum as you go, the sound blending with birdsong and clattering hooves. Children may wander into the courtyard at this point, yawning and hair-tousled, tugging at your skirts, eager to help, or simply to watch. You hand the youngest a single egg, letting them hold it gingerly, feeling pride swell in their small faces. Teaching through participation is as vital as any formal instruction. Survival depends on passing skills down, quietly embedding knowledge in the rhythm of daily life. Historians still argue whether formal education existed outside the nobility in the Middle Ages. But in the village, education is living, breathing, messy, and often sticky with milk or mud. You adjust a loose piece of straw roof that threatens to fall into the courtyard and marvel quietly at how much of survival depends on the unseen care and tiny adjustments made daily. You return to the milking task, ensuring nothing is wasted. The youngest goat nuzzles against your leg, seeking comfort or attention, and you stroke its back, feeling the soft fur and warm muscle under your palm. The small victories, the calm animal, the filled pail. The quieting of chickens create a rhythm that feels almost ceremonial, each motion building into the next. Quirky as it might seem, some women ground snail shells or ash into polishing mixtures for cooking pots while working in the yard. Blending chores with craft in a way that maximizes effort. You consider the creativity of your forebears and feel a small sense of connection to the centuries of women who performed these same movements before you. By mid-morning, sweat has dampened your back. The sun has climbed higher, and the courtyard is alive with movement. Animals rooting, neighbors calling, the occasional cart rattling over dirt roads. You take a deep breath, muscles warm, heart steady, and prepare for the next set of tasks. There is a satisfaction in seeing all animals fed, pens secure, and chores accomplished, a quiet triumph that is tangible in the clean smell of hay and the smooth surface of filled pails. Historians still argue whether this constant labor was oppressive or empowering, but from your vantage, it is simply life, a rhythm, a duty, and a skill honed with care and love. The courtyard, now sun-warmed and bustling, bears evidence of your labor. Chickens nestled, goats calm, pigs contentedly rooting. The minor triumphs: each egg collected, each fence tightened, each errant goat returned, compose a day in motion. Even the small, curious rituals, whispering to animals, adding herbs to milk, scratching soot into pottery, carry meaning beyond necessity. You step back, breathing in the mingled scents of straw, animal, smoke, and earth, a sensory tapestry unique to this moment. Your hands are rough, your fingers tingling with exertion, but your mind is alert, ready to flow seamlessly into the next wave of work. Meal preparation, cooking, and tending the household. The morning is over, but not complete. Its rhythm, labor, and tactile intimacy have set the stage for the unfolding day, reminding you that every chore is a thread woven into the larger fabric of medieval life. By the time the morning chores are winding down, the courtyard smells of hay, damp earth, and the lingering smoke of multiple hearths. You wipe your hands on a rough linen cloth and glance at the pails of milk and baskets of eggs, realizing that the next stage of your day begins in earnest. Bread, porridge, and the early cooking that sustains your household. The fire you coaxed to life hours ago is now steady, sending wisps of smoke curling upward and lending warmth to your chilled fingers. Historians still argue whether wood-fired clay ovens were more common than open hearth baking in small rural homes. But your setup is modest: a simple stone hearth with a blackened kettle suspended above. Practicality, not prestige, dictates your tools. You begin with kneading dough, flour dusting the floor and your hands, sticking stubbornly to palms and under fingernails. The texture is both comforting and laborious, a tactile meditation. Flour, water, and a pinch of salt form a humble mixture that will rise slowly if the weather and yeast cooperate. You press, fold, and punch, feeling the elasticity respond, muscles awakening as the dough transforms under your rhythm. Quirky as it may sound, some medieval households were known to test the elasticity of dough by tossing a small piece to see how far it would bounce. A rudimentary quality check that feels almost whimsical today. You smile at the thought, but keep kneading, mindful that any lapse in attention could result in dense, unappetizing bread. While the dough rests, your attention shifts to porridge, a staple that requires constant vigilance. Oats or barley simmer in a heavy pot, the steam rising, fogging your vision as you stir with a wooden spoon. You add a pinch of salt, occasionally stirring in milk from the morning's milking, the aroma rising into the small kitchen. Children may gather near, faces peering at the bubbling pot, sniffing the warmth of sustenance. Their anticipation adds urgency, a gentle reminder that your labor feeds more than just bodies. It nurtures spirits as well. Quirky fact: some medieval cooks added small amounts of herbs, like sage or thyme, to porridge, believing it enhanced digestion or even imbued the household with mild protection against sickness. You follow no superstition blindly, but you appreciate the small wisdom encoded in such traditions. Managing the fire is a task in itself. The heat must be balanced carefully. Too high, and the porridge scorches; too low, and it thickens sluggishly. You rake coals, add small kindling, and check the flames, adjusting constantly. Historians still argue whether the rhythm of cooking dictated the structure of the day or vice versa, but in practice, your morning is orchestrated entirely by the fire's temperament. You glance at the bread dough, now puffed slightly, proofed and ready for shaping. Small loaves form under your skilled fingers, placed carefully on a floured tray, and set near the fire to rise further. Each loaf carries an unseen weight. It is nourishment, currency, and occasionally a bargaining chip at the market. The kitchen hums with life. Chickens scratch at the doorframe, occasionally flapping in protest at a sudden clatter, while a cat weaves between your ankles, hunting for scraps. The smells of cooking mingle. The tang of milk, the earthy aroma of grains, the faintly acrid scent of smoke. You pause, tasting a small piece of dough, and grimace slightly. It needs more kneading, more attention, but the moment is a brief luxury. A tiny indulgence amid relentless labor. Some medieval recipes included sweeteners like honey or crushed dried fruit, a treat for special occasions or wealthier households. In your modest kitchen, you stick with simple, practical nutrition. But even the plain porridge is rich in ritual, aroma, and effort. The morning continues, each motion a seamless dance between ingredients, fire, and vessels. You scrape remnants from the stirring spoon, add water from the pail drawn earlier, and lift a small lid to check simmering milk. The heat rises to your face, beads of sweat forming along your temples, but the sensory immersion is oddly comforting. Quirky fact: in some villages, women used a finger dipped in honey to test porridge sweetness or to remove small lumps, a personal ritual that balanced precision with habit. You follow no formula other than observation, adjusting as you go, attuned to the smells, textures, and subtle cues that dictate success. Mid-morning chores bleed into early cooking. You fetch eggs for scrambling or baking, wash them carefully in cool water, and set them near the hearth. The warmth of the kitchen and the gentle crackling of the fire create a rhythm that lulls your mind while engaging your body fully. Children, now more animated after a brief pause outside, occasionally bump against your legs or nudge for attention. You offer them small tasks, stirring, fetching a wooden spoon, or gathering herbs, which teaches responsibility while keeping them occupied. Historians still argue whether children's participation in daily chores was purely functional or a form of early social education. But in your household, it is both. Labor and learning entwined in seamless motion. Bread is now ready to shape. You cut the dough into small portions, rolling each into rough oblongs or simple rounds, placing them with care near the hearth or on a shallow stone to bake. The fire's heat licks the edges, and the aroma of rising bread mingles with the porridge, creating an olfactory tapestry that signals sustenance, warmth, and care. Quirky, but true. Some medieval cooks inserted a tiny twig or pattern into the dough to ward off evil spirits or mark the batch for specific family members. You follow none of these superstitions, yet the tradition makes you smile. A reminder that even mundane labor is interlaced with cultural meaning and communal memory. While the bread bakes, you attend two side tasks: sweeping the floor, wiping counters, and rearranging pots and utensils prevent accidents and maintain a semblance of order. The kitchen is a controlled chaos. Steam rises from simmering pots. Animals occasionally wander near, and children chatter or tattle to one another. Your senses are fully engaged, tuned to the subtle cues. The scent of milk turning sour if left too long. The faint hiss of porridge boiling over. The soft creak of the wooden door announcing someone's approach. Each task, no matter how small, contributes to a rhythm that has persisted for centuries, a testament to the endurance and adaptability of women's labor. Midday approaches, and you pause briefly, tasting porridge and adjusting seasoning with a pinch of salt. The texture, warmth, and consistency are satisfying, the culmination of careful observation and muscle memory. A few remaining chores: arranging fresh herbs, checking bread progress, and ensuring the fire burns steadily fill the gaps. Historians still argue whether daily cooking was strictly utilitarian or also a form of creative expression. But for you, it is a mixture, necessary for survival, yet imbued with subtle artistry. Even the plainest porridge and bread are elevated by attention, timing, and gentle care. By late morning, your kitchen is a symphony of smell, sound, and motion. Bubbling porridge, warming bread, the low murmur of children, and occasional clatter of tools or dropped utensils. The fire continues its dance, demanding vigilance, while the smells of cooked grains and milk mingle with the faint scent of animals from the courtyard. You scrape the final traces of dough from the board, setting aside small scraps for the chickens or compost, conscious of waste even in small amounts. Quirky as it sounds, some medieval households believed leftover dough could be used to start the next batch. A practical early sourdough tradition that connects you with generations past. With porridge thick and bread browning gently, you gather small bowls and spoons, distributing food to children and any early risers. The kitchen hums with satisfaction and gratitude, a momentary pause in the ongoing rhythm of labor. Historians still argue whether communal meals were primarily functional or socially formative in rural villages. But in your home, they are both. Sustenance for the body, connection for the spirit. The tactile satisfaction of preparing food, the smell of baking bread, and the warmth of the fire combine into a sensory tapestry that anchors you in the present, even as the day's demands stretch endlessly ahead. By the time the first meals are consumed and the hearth is steady, you take a moment to breathe. The morning's labor fire tending, milking, egg collection, porridge stirring. Bread kneading has left your hands rough, your muscles awake, and your senses alive. You glance around the kitchen, clean but lived in, full of the marks of work and care. Quirky traditions, whispered superstitions, and centuries of inherited knowledge are woven into each motion, unnoticed yet vital. Historians still argue whether women's domestic labor was undervalued or strategically central to village life. But for you, it is simply the necessary rhythm of survival, skill, and care, setting the stage for afternoon chores, errands, and endless movement that define a medieval woman's world. With the first meals behind you and the hearth still warm, your attention turns to textiles, spinning, and needlework, the quieter yet equally essential side of daily labor. You gather bundles of wool or flax, their fibers rough against your palms, and settle onto a low stool near the window. The morning sunlight catches tiny motes of dust in the air, giving the room a soft, golden haze. You draw a deep breath and begin teasing the fibers apart, rolling them into manageable tufts. Historians still argue whether spinning was primarily a female occupation, or if men participated more than the sources suggest. But in your household, the task falls squarely to you. It's a work of patience, rhythm, and, strangely, meditation. The spindle and distaff await your practiced hands. You begin twisting fibers, feeling the slight resistance give way to a smooth thread, the motion repetitive yet satisfying. Your fingers move almost independently of thought, responding to the subtleties of fiber tension, thickness, and twist. Quirky though it may sound, some women would sing softly or hum specific tunes while spinning, believing the rhythm influenced the quality of the yarn or, at the very least, kept evil spirits at bay. You hum automatically, a low, soothing tune, not out of superstition, but because it eases your concentration and fills the quiet room with gentle sound. Around you, the low clatter of morning chores continues. Children call from the courtyard. A chicken flaps near the window, and the faint smell of baked bread wafts upward from the hearth below. Spinning is not merely for domestic satisfaction. The threads you produce will become garments, patches for worn clothing, or trade goods. Each strand is essential, each twist a small but crucial act in sustaining your household. As you work, you occasionally glance at the unfinished garments lying across a nearby bench. A child's tunic, a patchwork apron, and a pair of socks for the coming winter. Sewing and darning are delicate exercises, requiring not only skill, but also a certain level of creativity, as scraps must be pieced together efficiently. Some medieval households even used feathers or small plant fibers to smooth thread tension or fill gaps. A practical and quirky improvisation that speaks to ingenuity born of necessity. You set aside your spindle for a moment to mend a small tear in an apron, threading a needle and guiding it carefully along fraying edges. The motion is slow and deliberate, demanding attention and care. Yet it provides a different form of satisfaction than hauling water or stirring porridge. You reflect briefly on the interwoven tasks of the day: morning labor with animals, meal preparation, and now textiles, a seamless continuum of domestic expertise. Historians still argue whether the labor of women in spinning and sewing was undervalued or a crucial economic backbone. But for you, it is both. Survival, utility, and an almost meditative engagement with the material world. Children wander in, curious about the spinning wheel or drawn by the flicker of your hands working thread. You allow them small tasks: sorting wool, holding scissors, or threading spare needles. Their involvement is practical and instructive. Through play and participation, they absorb the methods, rhythms, and care that define your labor. You notice their laughter mingling with the soft whir of the spindle, a lightness that contrasts with the physical demands of the morning. Quirky, but true. Some villages encourage storytelling or small rhymes while children assisted, linking narrative, memory, and craft. You tell a few simple tales, keeping the thread of concentration, but offering moments of delight. As the day progresses, you switch between tasks fluidly. Spinning gives way to sewing, sewing to weaving or patching garments. Each motion is deliberate, mindful, and skillful. You handle needles with care, aware that a single slip could puncture skin or ruin delicate fabric. You might pause to rub sore fingers, soaked from earlier chores or stained by wool oils. The scent of freshly spun fibers mingled with lingering smoke from the hearth, and the faint tang of milk from the morning fills the room, grounding you in the immediacy of labor. Historians still argue whether spinning circles or communal sewing gatherings were social or primarily productive spaces. But your household blends both: quiet companionship, gossip, and practical output. Midday light streams across the room, catching on stray fibers that float lazily in the air, a quiet reminder of the invisible work surrounding your hands. You stretch, roll a ball of yarn for easier storage, and assess garments in progress. Some require delicate patterns, others simple mending, and the skill lies in balancing time, necessity, and precision. Quirky as it sounds, women sometimes use tiny knots or colored threads as subtle codes to distinguish their work, to signal which items belong to the household versus those intended for barter or gift. You smile at the ingenuity, aware that domestic labor has always been layered with strategy, culture, and even a touch of artistry. By early afternoon, the rhythmic hum of your work is punctuated by small interruptions: children seeking advice, a neighbor delivering a message, or a curious chicken pecking at fallen threads. You respond with calm, habitual gestures, teaching patience and attention in tandem with practical skills. Your hands are calloused, fingers nimble, and muscles subtly fatigued, yet your mind remains sharp, balancing multiple strands of labor and care. Historians still argue whether these tasks were primarily social, economic, or ritualistic. But in the quiet of your workspace, they feel integrally human, tactile, purposeful, and enduring. As the day moves forward, you combine spinning and sewing with minor domestic repairs. A loose door hinge, a torn curtain, or a fraying strap are addressed in succession. The room is alive with the evidence of human presence: finished garments folded neatly, raw fibers piled orderly, and small tools arrayed for easy access. Quirky, but true. Some households use tiny scraps of fabric to create decorative motifs on children's clothing, both for aesthetic pleasure and to imbue protective charm, demonstrating that utility and beauty were never entirely separate. Your work, like theirs, is functional, yet expressive, weaving practicality into a small tapestry of creativity and care. By mid-afternoon, the light begins to soften, signaling the approach of errands, market prep, or outdoor labor. Yet you linger for a moment over a nearly finished tunic, appreciating the smoothness of the thread, the evenness of the stitches, and the quiet satisfaction of completed effort. The spinning wheel rests nearby, the fibers twisted into neat skeins, ready for storage or use. Children have been recalled for lessons or chores, leaving a gentle hush that contrasts with the morning's chaotic energy. You inhale, feeling the mingling scents of wool, dust, and faint smoke, a sensory imprint that anchors your body and mind in the moment. A living record of skill and labor accumulated over countless mornings like this. The rhythm of spinning, sewing, and patching carries a subtle, almost hypnotic cadence. Your hands, eyes, and mind move together in a pattern honed by repetition, necessity, and inherited knowledge. Historians still debate how much formal instruction versus experiential learning shaped medieval women's domestic expertise. But your work is both. Learned from observation, perfected through daily practice, and enhanced by instinct. Each stitch, each twist of thread, and each patch is a tangible contribution to household survival. Woven into the larger tapestry of the day, quirky traditions, whispered superstitions, and small inventive tricks linger at the edges of your attention. A playful reminder that even labor is steeped in culture, story, and human ingenuity. By the time the sun leans toward the afternoon, your textiles are sorted, garments repaired, and fibers spun into smooth, ready-to-use thread. The room is orderly, yet alive, the evidence of effort everywhere. Skeins of yarn, half-finished garments, and tools resting in preparation for the next session. The gentle satisfaction of completed work pervades your body, a quiet counterpart to the physical exertion of the morning. You pause to stretch, noticing the subtle ache in your back, the faint cramp in your fingers, and the warmth spreading across your shoulders from hours of focused labor. The midday tasks have been completed, the quiet work of weaving, spinning, and sewing leaving a tangible imprint of skill, care, and endurance. With textiles neatly organized and the soft satisfaction of completed sewing lingering in your fingertips, your focus shifts outward. Market preparation and errands. The sun has climbed higher, warming the village paths and signaling it is time to engage with the broader world beyond your courtyard. You gather baskets filled with eggs, butter, and small portions of your freshly baked bread, weighing each carefully to avoid spillage. The air carries scents of livestock, dust, and the faint tang of nearby herbs, a sensory map that guides your steps and informs your rhythm. Historians still argue whether women predominantly handled market trade in rural villages, or if men assumed most public negotiation roles. But in your household, the responsibility clearly falls to you. The road to the market is uneven, a mix of packed dirt, small stones, and lingering puddles from last night's rain. You adjust the baskets, shifting weight from hip to shoulder, and step carefully, aware that a misstep could send valuable food tumbling. Chickens squawk from a nearby coop, and goats graze lazily by fences, their attention momentarily distracting you. Quirky as it may sound, some villagers believed walking a certain path while carrying goods would bring luck or increase sales, an early superstition tied to ritual and commerce. You follow no strict path, but you are mindful, perhaps out of habit, that the physical journey itself sets the tone for the social and economic exchange awaiting you. Along the way, you encounter neighbors, exchanging brief greetings and updates. The northern field is flooded, one says. Watch for foxes near the eastern path, another warns. Each snippet of news carries weight, practical information that will influence both your errands and household tasks. You nod politely, storing the information in your mind, your body moving with practiced efficiency. The rhythm of travel, balancing, stepping, and adjusting your load mirrors the domestic choreography you've practiced for years. Some medieval guides even recommended small chants or counting steps allowed to maintain focus during long walks. a quirky method of combining work, safety, and mindfulness. Upon reaching the market square, the scene is lively. Vendors shout, baskets overflow with produce, and animals intermingle with the bustle. You navigate through the crowd, eyes alert, hands steady, ensuring your goods remain intact. Negotiation is a delicate dance. Too aggressive, and you risk offending. Too passive, and you sell for less than fair value. You recall advice passed down from elder women: maintain a polite smile. Know the weight and quality of your goods, and never undervalue your labor. Historians still argue whether these market tactics were formalized into gendered roles or evolved organically through observation and necessity. But you have internalized the art, a mix of instinct, experience, and subtle social strategy. Quirky practices abound. Some vendors sprinkle a pinch of salt or ashes on grain or flour to demonstrate honesty or subtly improve preservation, a tradition whose efficacy may be debatable but is observed closely by all participants. You nod approvingly to such gestures, understanding the invisible signals that regulate commerce as much as price and weight. Your own goods, fresh eggs, butter, small loaves are arranged neatly, with attention to appearance and balance, because the eye often influences choice as much as taste. A passing child tugs at a basket strap, and you respond with calm firmness, ensuring your produce is secure while offering a small smile to appease both child and onlookers. Negotiations begin. You offer eggs in exchange for a small sack of salt, a necessity for both cooking and preservation. The vendor counters, and a brief back and forth ensues. Each gesture, pause, and tone carrying subtle weight. Quirky but true. Some market guides suggested tapping a coin lightly on the table 3 times to signal sincerity, a ritual that may be more symbolic than practical, but is widely recognized. You observe this, and your instinctive timing seems to please the vendor. Historians still debate whether medieval markets relied more on formal currency or barter and gift exchange, but for you, both systems are alive and operational. Each transaction a blend of skill, observation, and negotiation. The sun climbs higher, and the air fills with dust, smells, and the murmur of multiple trades happening simultaneously. You navigate through crowds, collecting small items for the household, checking the quality of flour, inspecting herbs for freshness, and making mental notes for future needs. Children may accompany you, learning the unspoken rules of public interaction, observing, and occasionally holding small items or assisting in carrying minor loads. Their presence is both educational and practical. Through participation, they learn timing, negotiation, and the importance of observation, all without explicit instruction. Quirky as it seems, some families mark certain goods with small symbols or colored threads to identify ownership, preventing theft or confusion, an early form of inventory control that blends ingenuity with necessity. By mid-afternoon, your errands have filled baskets, engaged mind, and strengthened connections across the village. You pause briefly to catch your breath, leaning against a post, noticing the tactile satisfaction of completed negotiation and careful movement through crowds. Each interaction, exchange, and decision reinforces the subtle skill set medieval women cultivated: observation, timing, negotiation, and endurance. The day's rhythm continues seamlessly from courtyard labor to market engagement, demonstrating that survival, economy, and social cohesion are inextricably linked. Historians still argue whether these market skills were undervalued forms of labor or central to village prosperity, but your own experience confirms both. They are indispensable. As you begin the return journey, baskets heavier now, you adjust each load carefully, mindful of balance and stability. Chickens and goats stir at your approach, children and neighbors glance curiously, and the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the path. You take small, measured breaths, feeling the rhythm of walking, balancing, and adjusting a motion familiar from countless mornings and afternoons. Quirky traditions persist. Some women carried small charms in their pockets, believed to protect goods during transit or ensure safe passage. You carry nothing but knowledge and experience, trusting in careful hands and watchful eyes. Back in the courtyard, you unload the baskets, noting the intact eggs, the fresh herbs, and the flour that has survived the journey. The satisfaction is quiet but profound. Sustenance for your household secured, small but vital additions for cooking, and the reassurance that your labor has produced tangible results. The market is behind you, but its lessons social nuance, negotiation, observation, and endurance remain active, embedded in muscle memory and the quiet awareness of your own capability. Each successful trip reinforces both skill and confidence, a reinforcement of the intricate daily dance you navigate. As you arrange goods in their proper places, children return to assist in minor tasks, redistributing herbs or stacking bread. You supervise gently, correcting errors with soft guidance rather than harsh reprimand. This combination of teaching, labor, and attention ensures continuity. The household runs smoothly while knowledge passes seamlessly to the next generation. Historians still debate whether these moments were primarily pedagogical or practical, but in your experience, they are both. The market, errands, and domestic coordination are not discrete events. They are threads woven into a continuous fabric of labor, skill, and responsibility. The afternoon sun begins its slow descent, warming your back as you step lightly to check the animals, the hearth, and the freshly arranged baskets. The day has shifted from interior labor to engagement with the wider village, each moment requiring awareness, precision, and endurance. Quirky tidbits linger in your mind. Some market guides recommended humming softly while walking home to protect goods from witches or ill fortune. You hum, not out of superstition, but because the rhythm eases fatigue. A small trick to maintain focus and energy after hours of balancing weight, negotiating exchanges, and navigating crowds. Historians still argue whether superstition, habit, or necessity drove such practices, but in your rhythm, they feel integrated, natural, and effective. By late afternoon, errands complete, baskets unloaded, and household items in place, you pause to survey your surroundings. The courtyard smells of animals, earth, and faint smoke. The kitchen retains the warmth of the morning hearth. The woven textiles are sorted and tidy. The day has flowed seamlessly from sunrise chores to market engagements, each segment interlocking with the next, a choreography honed by years of repetition and experience. You rest briefly, stretching arms and back, aware of the fatigue that accompanies competence, and ready yourself mentally for the next wave of labor. The afternoon fields, harvesting, or tending additional domestic responsibilities. By now, the sun has begun its slow descent, casting long golden shadows across the village. The mid-afternoon warmth lingers, and you turn your attention to the outdoor chores that sustain both household and garden. The courtyard, previously alive with the hum of market deliveries and domestic activity, now demands care. Sweeping stray hay, mending fences, and checking the animals for any signs of trouble. You move with practiced efficiency, broom in hand, feeling the coarse straw scrape against the dirt floor as you sweep. Historians still argue whether such chores were delegated hierarchically among family members, or if women orchestrated them entirely. But in your experience, the rhythm and sequence of tasks fall squarely on your shoulders. The chickens, now less frantic than in the morning, scratch at the ground for leftover grains, their feathers brushing against your ankles as you move among them. A goat nudges your side, looking for attention or perhaps a small handful of forage. You reach into a basket for scraps, tossing them lightly, the motion satisfying both creature and human alike. Quirky as it may seem, some medieval households believed that feeding animals in a particular sequence, chickens first, then goats, then pigs, would ensure productivity and good luck. You follow no superstition explicitly, but the sequence has become habit, rhythmically ingrained after years of repetition. The small fence around the goat pen requires attention. A post has begun to lean, and you grasp it, adjusting and securing it with a simple wooden peg. The labor is physical, demanding leverage and care, and your arms ache subtly with the exertion. Nearby, the pigs grunt in anticipation, sniffing at loose scraps you intend to gather later. Keeping the boundaries strong prevents chaos and ensures both safety and efficiency. Historians still argue whether medieval fencing materials and techniques varied primarily due to regional resources or cultural preference. But for you, the process is practical, effective, quick, and repeatable. Next, you move to the garden or small patch of cultivated land adjacent to your dwelling. Rows of vegetables, perhaps cabbages, onions, or beans require weeding, watering, and inspection for pests. You bend low, fingers tracing the soil, plucking weeds carefully, mindful not to disturb roots. The aroma of fresh earth mingles with the faint sweetness of ripening produce, creating a sensory backdrop that grounds you amid physical exertion. Quirky but true. Some medieval women used crushed eggshells around young plants to deter pests, a simple trick rooted in observation and trial and error. Historians still debate whether these small interventions significantly increased yield or were largely symbolic, but you have found them surprisingly effective. As you tend the garden, your mind briefly drifts to future tasks, preparing additional meals, preserving produce, and perhaps starting small, dyeing, or textile work later in the day. The interwoven nature of medieval labor means that one chore often leads naturally to another, each linked by time, resources, and necessity. A gentle breeze stirs leaves and dust, cooling your neck as you kneel in the soil. You pause to inspect a beetroot or cabbage, noting its growth and estimating when it will be ready for harvest. The tactile engagement, the feel of leaves, the firmness of roots. The smell of earth central to your work, a sensory record of diligence and care. Watering comes next. You carry a small wooden bucket, carefully lifting it from the trough, and sprinkle water evenly across the garden rows. Each plant benefits from precise attention, though you know that some will thrive regardless. A reminder that nature and human effort are intertwined, but not entirely controllable. Quirky as it may seem, some medieval guides recommended whispering gently to plants or tapping the soil rhythmically to encourage growth. Ritualistic gestures whose efficacy remains debated. Historians still argue whether such practices were widespread or largely anecdotal. But you find them comforting, a quiet way to imbue intention into repetitive labor. While working, you remain vigilant for animals or pests. Chickens occasionally wander into the garden, plucking at leaves, and you redirect them gently but firmly. Goats sometimes try to sample tender shoots, and pigs can overturn small sections if unsupervised. Each movement demands observation, adjustment, and anticipation. Quirky but true. Some households use thorny branches or small hedges to keep animals at bay while training them to respect boundaries, a form of low-tech crowd control that required ingenuity and patience. You marvel quietly at the layers of problem-solving embedded in daily routines, strategies refined over generations. Mid-afternoon also brings the need to inspect the larger landscape for any signs of issues. Fences weakened by wind, water channels clogged with debris, or small predators lingering near poultry. Your senses are alert, ears catching distant noises, the bark of a dog, the rustle of small mammals, the faint clang of a blacksmith down the street. Each sound informs your decisions. Adjust the gate, fetch a tool, or redirect a wayward goat. Historians still argue whether such constant vigilance was perceived as drudgery or skillful management. But for you, it is instinctive, second nature. The cadence of observation and action forms a rhythm as familiar as your own heartbeat. After inspecting the periphery, you return to minor repairs. A loose stone in the path, a sagging fence post, or a fraying rope demands immediate attention to prevent accidents. The labor is physical but satisfying, each small correction creating a safer, more efficient environment. Quirky as it may seem, some villages encourage small rituals, tapping the repaired post 3 times or arranging stones in particular. Patterns to mark work as complete and ward off misfortune. You follow no superstition but acknowledge the human tendency to ritualize effort, a subtle echo of centuries of practice. By late afternoon, the courtyard, garden, and pens are in relative order. Animals are fed, fences are reinforced, and plants have received care and attention. You pause, brushing dust and sweat from your brow, taking in the results of hours of coordinated effort. The tactile and sensory feedback, the smell of earth, the warmth of sun on skin, the sound of contented animals provides a quiet reward, a natural reinforcement for relentless labor. Historians still argue whether such tasks were exhausting drudgery or a source of quiet satisfaction and agency. But in your experience, they are both, a duality that defines the rhythm of your life. Finally, you gather tools and supplies, storing them neatly for future use. The garden implements, the broom, and the small mending kit are placed in accessible locations, evidence of organization and foresight. You survey the space one last time. The courtyard now orderly, animals secure, and plants flourishing. Quirky tidbits drift through your mind, such as the medieval practice of scattering certain flowers to repel pests or attract beneficial insects. Reminder that observation and creativity often guided survival. The day's outdoor labor, from sweeping to garden care, demonstrates a balance of physical exertion, practical knowledge, and subtle artistry, all woven seamlessly into the flow of daily life. As the sun begins its slow descent toward evening, you take a deep breath, appreciating the physicality, rhythm, and sensory richness of the day's outdoor labor. Your muscles are warmed, your hands slightly roughened, and your mind attuned to the interplay of tasks, observation, and anticipation. The afternoon's work has carried you from courtyard organization to garden cultivation, blending routine, care, and subtle ingenuity. Historians still debate the precise role of women's labor in shaping village economies and domestic efficiency. But from your vantage, each action, each adjustment, each observation, each small triumph is inseparable from survival, skill, and the tactile intimacy of life in motion. As the afternoon wanes and the golden light softens, your attention shifts to water collection and household maintenance tasks that, though less visible, are vital for survival. You grab this sturdy wooden bucket, its worn handle fitting comfortably in your hands, and step toward the village well or nearby stream. The path is uneven, littered with stones and roots, and you move carefully, balancing the empty bucket while imagining the weight it will soon bear. Historians still argue whether women primarily managed water gathering, or if it was a shared responsibility across genders. But in your household, it has long been your domain. The task is both familiar and demanding, a necessary ritual that structures the rhythm of the day. At the well, you draw water with practiced ease, twisting the rope and letting the bucket descend into cool darkness before hoisting it back. The water sloshes gently, creating a muted, de-soothing rhythm that contrasts with the more chaotic movements of earlier chores. Quirky though it may sound, some medieval guides recommended murmuring a small phrase or prayer while drawing water to ensure purity or good fortune, a superstitious thread woven into practical labor. You hum quietly instead, more to keep your mind alert and the cadence steady than to invoke any mystical effect. The bucket heavy, you begin the careful journey back to the courtyard, muscles tensing with each step to maintain balance and avoid spillage. Back at the house, water becomes the medium for countless chores: washing vegetables, preparing dough for the next meal, cleaning utensils, and even bathing young children. You set the bucket down, noting the cool reflection of sunlight on the surface, and proceed to fill smaller vessels for various tasks. Your hands are wet and chilled, yet the tactile engagement, the weight, the movement, the temperature's grounding. Historians still debate whether women's water management was considered labor or an invisible skill essential to household survival. But in practice, it requires both endurance and attention to detail. Quirky as it may sound, some households believed that the first bucket drawn in the morning held special protective properties, a superstition that echoes through centuries of practice and habit. With water distributed, you turn to cleaning. The hearth, now slightly cooled, requires attention, as does the kitchen floor, counters, and occasional spills of flour or milk. You kneel, scrub, and sweep with rhythmic care, muscles moving in familiar sequences, your mind engaged in practical observation. The smell of damp straw, ash, and lingering smoke fills the room, a sensory map of labor and care. Children may assist, holding small brushes or cloths, learning the choreography of cleanliness, responsibility, and household order. Historians still argue whether this was primarily instructional for children or a necessary redistribution of labor. But the outcome is both: a clean space and trained hands for the future. Meanwhile, you tend to minor repairs that have accumulated over the day. Loose boards on the floor, small leaks in a roof patch, or fraying ropes in storage baskets demand attention. Each task is completed with deliberate focus, balancing speed and precision, strength and care. Quirky, but true. Some medieval households used crushed eggshells or chalk to mark repairs, a subtle code that allowed other family members to identify completed work. You note the evidence of your efforts: the repaired boards, tightened ropes, and neatly organized tools up, visible testament to the invisible labor that sustains the household. Mid-afternoon light filters through windows, catching dust motes and illuminating the workspace. You pause briefly, feeling the pull of fatigue in your shoulders and lower back, a quiet reminder that hours of bending, lifting, and precise movement accumulate in subtle ache. Yet your mind remains alert, balancing multiple sensory streams: the sound of children playing outside, the occasional bleat of a goat, and the low murmur of conversation from neighbors. Quirky as it may seem, some medieval guides suggested humming or reciting short rhymes while completing repetitive chores to maintain focus and morale. Strategy you have absorbed instinctively, weaving rhythm and attention together. Attention then shifts to laundry, another vital but physically demanding task. You gather linens, smocks, and small towels, carrying them carefully to a water source. Washing involves scrubbing, beating, and rinsing, all with cold water that shocks your hands initially, but quickly numbs fingers into efficiency. The repetitive motions become meditative. Soap lathers, cloths twist, and water foams before draining back into a trough. Historians still debate the extent to which laundering was social, functional, or ritualized, but in your household, it is all three: necessary for hygiene, social expectation, and personal satisfaction. Quirky practices persist. Some women added crushed herbs to the wash for fragrance or perceived disinfecting qualities, a small nod to sensory pleasure and superstition alike. By late afternoon, water, cleaning, and laundry tasks converge seamlessly. You wring out wet linens, hang them carefully on a line or rack, and gather tools and buckets for storage. The courtyard smells fresh, the hearth is tidy, and water has been replenished for cooking and future chores. Children return intermittently, curious or assigned to minor tasks, and you guide them gently, ensuring both safety and engagement. Historians still argue whether children's participation in such labor was primarily educational or a necessity born of household economy. But your experience blends both. They learn the rhythm of work while contributing meaningfully. After laundry and cleaning, you focus on minor food preservation: salting, drying, or storing vegetables, eggs, and leftover bread. Each motion is deliberate, ensuring sustenance lasts and that spoilage is minimized. Quirky as it may sound, some women in neighboring villages preserved food by placing small charms in storage. Arius's symbolic gesture, whose efficacy historians still debate. You follow none of these rituals, yet you respect the ingenuity and ritual embedded in the practice. The tangible results of preservation: a neatly stacked pile of salted vegetables or carefully wrapped bread offer a quiet satisfaction, a visible manifestation of the day's labor. As the sun dips lower, shadows stretching across the courtyard, you take a moment to observe the results of your afternoon work. Animals are fed, fences repaired, garden tended, water drawn and distributed. Laundry washed and hung, and food preserved. The rhythm of movement, observation, and care creates a tangible order that contrasts with the chaos of earlier hours. Historians still debate whether women's labor was undervalued or central to village survival. But standing here, surveying the cumulative effect of hours of meticulous effort, the importance is undeniable. Each motion, whether lifting, bending, scrubbing, or balancing, is a stitch in the fabric of daily life. Finally, you store tools, wipe hands on linen, and take a brief pause to breathe. The courtyard smells of earth, water, and faint smoke. The kitchen retains warmth from the hearth, and the textile work of earlier hours rests neatly folded. Your muscles ache subtly, fingers slightly roughened from repeated motions. And yet, the satisfaction is profound. The invisible scaffolding of domestic labor has been maintained, ensuring safety, sustenance, and continuity. Quirky remnants of superstition and ritual linger faintly in your awareness, a playful echo of centuries of accumulated wisdom. The afternoon's labor has been both physical and mental, blending strength, precision, observation, and subtle artistry, a seamless prelude to evening responsibilities, when the day's final tasks demand both stamina and grace. As the sun dips lower in the sky, casting long amber rays across the village, your attention shifts to the final domestic labors that bridge day into evening. The courtyard quiets, birds settle on fences, and even the animals exhibit a subtle pause, a lull before the final surge of evening activity. You carry baskets of vegetables, herbs, and small portions of earlier prepared food into the kitchen, placing them near the hearth in preparation for the evening meal. Historians still argue whether meal preparation dictated the household's daily rhythm, or if the household's rhythm dictated meal timing. But in practice, we know that timing, fire, and organization must align to avoid chaos. The hearth, now gently glowing rather than roaring, requires a final check. You poke embers, add small sticks for steady heat, and position pots for simmering. The aromas of earlier bread, lingering milk, and herbs begin to mingle, creating an olfactory tapestry that signals both comfort and sustenance. Quirky as it may seem, some medieval households believed that arranging pots in a triangular formation over the fire promoted even cooking and warded off kitchen spirits, a superstition whose efficacy historians still debate. You smile at the idea, but follow the geometric arrangement instinctively, a habit embedded through observation and tradition. Evening meal preparation blends physical exertion with subtle artistry. You chop vegetables, measure grains, and stir simmering pots, moving seamlessly between tasks. The rhythm of knives on boards, spoons on pots, and water dripping from herbs creates a muted symphony, a private soundtrack to hours of labor. Children may wander near, curious, or assigned small tasks such as stirring a pot, fetching utensils, or arranging plates. This teaching through participation has been refined over generations. Each instruction, gentle correction, demonstration, or quiet encouragement instills skill and confidence. Historians still argue whether this method primarily educated children or ensured household efficiency. But in practice, it achieves both, blending learning with utility. Mid-evening, the focus turns to bread sliced, distributed, and occasionally toasted over the hearth embers. You handle each loaf with care, mindful of its warmth and texture. A small pinch of salt or a smear of butter might be added to enrich flavor, a subtle indulgence after a long day of labor. Quirky but true. Some households place tiny tokens or herbs inside bread to signal which loaf was for family and which for visitors, a system that combined practicality with a touch of ritual. Historians still debate whether these practices had symbolic meaning, functional use, or both, but you appreciate the subtle guidance it offers, especially when managing multiple loaves and hungry mouths. As the meal progresses, you move among tasks, stirring pots, serving food, and ensuring everyone's needs are met. The kitchen is alive with sound, the scrape of wooden spoons, low conversation, the occasional clatter of a dropped utensil. The tactile engagement warm pots, cool vegetables, and coarse bread grounds you in the immediate sensory world. Some medieval women also used this time to teach songs, chants, or small rhymes, linking nourishment with culture and memory. You hum softly, a gentle background to the clatter and chatter, blending rhythm, attention, and subtle artistry into a single flowing motion. After the meal, the cleanup begins. Pots are scraped, rinsed, and returned to the fire for washing. Tables and counters are wiped with cloth. Leftover food is stored for the following day. Your movements are deliberate, efficient, yet mindful, each action closing a cycle of labor begun at sunrise. Quirky as it may seem, some households used small marks on storage containers to indicate freshness or intended use, an early form of inventory management. Historians still argue whether such practices were universal or localized. But for you, they are practical, offering clarity in the daily rhythm of work. Children are guided toward tidying tasks as well sweeping crumbs, arranging plates, or gathering firewood for evening warmth. You instruct calmly, correcting errors gently while encouraging independence. Their participation ensures that lessons are embedded in memory while labor is distributed, a dual benefit that has persisted across generations. The evening chores, like earlier domestic work, blend physical effort with observation, strategy, and social training. Historians still debate the balance between pedagogy and necessity in children's labor, but in your household, it is inseparable. Teaching through doing, learning through participation. By late evening, the hearth burns low, casting a soft glow across the room. You pause to assess remaining tasks. Sweeping floors, securing doors, stowing utensils, and preparing small portions of food for early morning use. Each motion is intentional, conserving energy while maximizing efficiency. Quirky traditions linger. Some families whispered a short blessing or tapped utensils before storage to ensure their effectiveness or ward off misfortune. You perform no ritual consciously, but the movements habitual. Careful echoes centuries of accumulated domestic knowledge, a living connection to those who labored before you. The kitchen gradually quiets, children retreating to sleep and animals settling into their pens. You complete final tidying, placing tools in accessible locations, and ensuring hearth embers are safely contained. The tactile satisfaction of completed labor-smooth counters, arranged baskets, and organized utensils provides a moment of reflection. Historians still argue whether the end-of-day rituals of cleaning, organizing, and securing household spaces were symbolic, practical, or both, but standing in the warm glow of the hearth, it feels undeniably restorative, a tangible result of diligence and care. Finally, you tend to small personal rituals, washing hands, rubbing weary muscles, and perhaps preparing a cup of herbal infusion. The aroma of dried herbs, mint, chamomile, or sage fills the air, signaling a transition from labor to reflection. Quirky but true. Some medieval women kept a small amulet or charm in the kitchen as a token of protection or gratitude, a symbolic anchor at the close of day. You pause for a moment, appreciating the sensory richness of labor, smells, textures, and subtle warmth of the hearth before turning to quieter contemplation. The evening blends physical accomplishment, subtle artistry, and reflective mindfulness, preparing body and mind for the final responsibilities before nightfall. As the sun fully sets, shadows deepen, and the soft hush of evening settles over the household. You complete final rounds, checking the fire, securing animals, and ensuring food for the next day is safely stored. Muscles ache pleasantly. Fingers are roughened from hours of sewing, stirring, and lifting, and your mind carries the quiet satisfaction of tasks completed efficiently and well. Historians still debate whether such evening routines were more burdensome or satisfying than earlier labor. But in your experience, the rhythm of work, observation, and care culminates here in a quiet, intentional pause. Quirky traditions and faint rituals linger in thought, woven seamlessly into the day's labor, a reminder that every motion is both functional and cultural, practical, and human. With night approaching, your focus turns to tending animals and preparing for the quiet of darkness, a critical bridge between the day's labor and the household's rest. You move through the courtyard, inspecting chickens, goats, and pigs, ensuring each is accounted for and safely enclosed. The evening air is cooler now, carrying faint scents of hay, earth, and lingering warmth from the hearth. Historians still debate whether women's responsibility for animal care was rigidly gendered or shared more evenly, but in your daily routine, it is your task to observe, feed, and secure. The work is both repetitive and vital, a rhythm honed by years of necessity. Chickens peck at the ground as you scatter grain, the soft clatter of beaks providing a quiet accompaniment to your movements. Goats nibble at stalks and leaves, occasionally pressing against your hands for attention or an extra handful of forage. You measure portions carefully, mindful of each animal's needs and the household's finite resources. Quirky, but true. Some medieval villagers believed that whistling while feeding animals encouraged them to settle quietly for the night or even increased productivity. You whistle softly, more to soothe yourself than the livestock, yet it imbues the task with a subtle rhythm, transforming repetition into a gentle, meditative practice. After feeding, you check enclosures, mending fences or gates if necessary. Loose posts or fraying rope are tightened, and gaps are inspected to prevent small predators from disturbing the animals overnight. Historians still argue whether fencing techniques varied more by necessity or by regional custom, but in your experience, efficiency and vigilance are paramount. The tactile engagement, pressing wood, feeling rope fibers. Testing hinges connects your body to both environment and labor, embedding each action in memory and muscle. Quirky tidbits linger in your awareness. Some households hung small tokens or herbs in barns as protective charms, an intersection of superstition and practical care. Once animals are secure, you turn attention back to household preparation. The hearth is gently banked to maintain warmth through the night, small embers glowing beneath a light layer of ash. You carry leftover food, portions for early morning, and scraps for compost or feeding animals. Each motion is deliberate, organized, and efficient, a final orchestration of the day's labor. Historians still debate whether such meticulous preparation was strictly practical or also psychological way to structure the day and provide reassurance, but in your practice, it serves both functions, offering tangible control over your environment and a quiet sense of accomplishment. Next comes final cleaning and organization. Floors are swept, surfaces wiped, and utensils stowed. Water vessels are replenished for the night, and baskets and tools are returned to designated spaces. Children, if present, assist gathering small items or arranging leftover provisions. You guide gently, blending instruction with supervision, a seamless integration of teaching and labor. Quirky as it may seem, some households used small marks, knots, or colored threads on utensils or baskets to indicate readiness or cleanliness. A rudimentary but effective system for managing shared spaces. Historians still argue whether such organizational systems were widespread or localized, but you find them practical and reassuring. As darkness deepens, you begin the final round of personal preparation. Hands are washed, garments adjusted, and simple grooming performed. The tactile, sensory aspect: warm water on chilled skin. The weight of clothing, the subtle coolness of air moving through the room marks the transition from labor to rest. Quirky, but true. Some women would rub a small, herb-infused cloth across wrists or forehead, believed to ease tension or encourage restful sleep. You follow the practice instinctively, valuing the sensory comfort it provides rather than any mystical effect. The evening quiet allows reflection. You move slowly through rooms, noting areas of success and minor imperfections. A floor slightly dusty, a gate slightly loose, or a basket not perfectly aligned. These observations are part of the ongoing process. It's a continuous loop of assessment, correction, and maintenance that defines household labor. Historians still debate whether such constant attention was burdensome or empowering, but in your routine, It is both a combination of responsibility, skill, and subtle satisfaction. Each small correction strengthens household security, efficiency, and the invisible architecture of daily life. Finally, the house settles. Animals rest. Children are asleep or engaged in quiet play, and the hearth maintains a steady, gentle warmth. You pause by the window or doorway, observing the fading light, feeling the subtle fatigue of muscles, and sensing the accumulated rhythm of the day's labor: spinning, sewing, cooking, cleaning, feeding, negotiating, and preparing. Quirky thoughts drift like memories of whispered nursery rhymes during chores or the odd superstitions of neighbors, but they blend into a comforting pattern, a tapestry of cultural and personal knowledge. Historians still argue whether domestic labor was undervalued or central to medieval life, but in your perception, it is indispensable, shaping both survival and identity. You take a final look around, ensuring order, completeness, and readiness for the coming night. Tools are stowed, embers banked, food secured, and animals safe. The tactile and sensory impressions: warmth of fire, the weight of baskets, the smell of fresh herbs and animals linger as a quiet affirmation of effort well spent. Quirky, but true. Some medieval women would whisper small words of thanks to the household spirits or ancestors, a symbolic recognition of labor and continuity. You smile subtly, carrying forward the invisible threads of tradition and practical wisdom. The evening, like the day, unfolds as a seamless flow of tasks, observations, and care, leaving your body and mind gently attuned to the rhythm of life. Night has fully fallen now, and the world beyond your courtyard has quieted to a gentle hum, the occasional animal stir, distant dog bark, or the faint rustle of wind through trees. You move deliberately through the final round of evening tasks, your body aware of every step, every motion honed by years of repetition. The hearth glows softly, a warm anchor in the darkness, and you adjust coals to ensure a gentle, lasting warmth through the night. Historians still debate how much women's nightly routines were structured by necessity versus personal preference, but in your experience, this ritual is both functional and soothing, a final orchestration of labor that closes the day. You begin with a thorough check of the household. Doors are secured, windows closed against drafts, and animals verified in their pens. Chickens cluck softly in the darkness, goats settle with a faint shuffle, and pigs grunt contentedly. You move from pen to pen, ensuring gates are latched and that no creature is left vulnerable. Quirky, but true. Some medieval families tied small bells or hung charms near animal enclosures believed to ward off nocturnal predators or spirits. You follow none of these superstitions consciously. Yet the practice reflects centuries of observation and tradition, a subtle echo in your methodical movements. The kitchen demands one final sweep. Utensils are cleaned and returned to their proper places, counters wiped, and leftover scraps stored for compost or early morning use. You handle each pot and board with care, the tactile rhythm of cleaning offering a subtle meditation. Children, if present, are instructed to fetch simple items or gather small tools, blending education with task completion. Historians still argue whether children's participation in nightly chores was primarily practical or pedagogical. But in your household, the dual purpose is clear. Learning and efficiency are inseparable. Quirky tidbits linger in memory like the subtle placement of a tiny herb bundle to indicate freshness, practical, and symbolic intertwined. Once the kitchen is secure, you turn attention to textiles and household organization. Freshly laundered linens are folded neatly, unfinished sewing projects are stored safely, and baskets are arranged for easy morning access. The tactile satisfaction: smooth fabrics, organized baskets, and orderly space offers a quiet reward, an acknowledgement of skill and care. Historians still debate whether such organization was considered laborious or empowering, but standing amid neatly arranged household items, you sense both pride and relief. Quirky, but true. Some households use colored threads or simple markings to indicate ownership or intended use. A subtle code that blends practicality with memory. Next, you attend to personal preparation, washing hands and face, adjusting clothing, and perhaps preparing a small herbal infusion to sip. The tactile experience: warm water on chilled skin, the faint scent of dried herbs. The gentle weight of garments marks a transition from labor to reflection. Quirky traditions echo faintly, like whispering thanks to household spirits or ancestors, a symbolic recognition of labor and continuity. You participate quietly, not out of superstition, but to acknowledge the day's rhythm and your role within it. Historians still argue about the balance between ritual and practical habit, but in practice, both merge seamlessly here. With personal routines complete, you sit or move to a quiet space, perhaps near the hearth or window, observing the darkness outside. The village is still, the courtyard bathed in moonlight, and you feel the accumulated fatigue of a full day, muscles warmed and slightly sore, fingers roughened from spinning, sewing, cooking, and cleaning. Your mind reflects on the flow of tasks, each connecting to the next: morning textiles, market errands, afternoon garden and animal labor, evening meal preparation, and final household organization. Quirky thoughts drift like the memory of a child's mischief or a neighbor's peculiar superstition, but they settle gently, blending into the narrative of the day. The night brings a slower pace, a soft cadence as you perform final checks. You listen to the gentle ambient sounds, animals breathing, wind rustling through leaves, and the faint crackle of embers. These sounds are familiar, grounding, almost meditative. Historians still argue whether such evening routines were primarily practical, cultural, or psychological. But you know that each task, each motion, sustains household rhythm and personal mindfulness. Quirky practices, such as placing herbs under pillows or murmuring quiet phrases, linger as gentle cultural echoes. Subtle reminders of human ingenuity and care woven through centuries of domestic labor. Before resting, you may engage in small, reflective, or restorative tasks, preparing tools for early morning, checking on food storage, or reviewing unfinished textile work. Each action is deliberate, efficient, and integrated into the broader rhythm of life. The tactile sensations, the weight of tools, the texture of textiles, the warmth of residual embers reinforce awareness and continuity. Historians still debate whether women's labor was undervalued or central to village survival. But the evidence is clear in practice. Your day, long and intricate, is both necessary and skillful, a testament to endurance, observation, and care. Finally, as the household quiets completely, you settle into a resting space, perhaps a simple bed, a mat near the hearth, or a woven blanket on the floor. The room is warm, organized, and safe, a tangible reward for hours of labor. You close your eyes, allowing the body to relax, the mind to drift, and the day's accumulated rhythms to settle. Quirky and subtle echoes linger at the hum of a tune, the faint scent of herbs, or the memory of whispered lessons, but they are gentle companions in the transition to rest. Historians still argue whether the domestic routines of women created empowerment, endurance, or both. But lying here, you feel the quiet triumph of competence and continuity, a seamless blend of survival, skill, and reflection. The night stretches around you like a soft, familiar blanket, muffling distant sounds and allowing the courtyard, the animals, and even the walls themselves to settle into quietude. Your body feels pleasantly heavy, the subtle ache of exertion reminding you that each movement, from the morning's first sweep to the final securing of animals, has left its mark. The air carries the faint warmth of embers, mingling with earthy scents of herbs, straw, and the lingering fragrance of baked bread. You breathe slowly, letting the rhythm of inhalation and exhalation soothe both mind and muscles, the gentle cadence echoing the day's labor now tucked into memory. Your thoughts drift through the day, not in a rush, but as a soft narrative. The touch of rough rope, The cool weight of a water bucket, the scent of fresh soil, the sound of chickens scratching, and the delicate precision of sewing. Each memory is a tactile echo, a reminder of skill and endurance, of labor intertwined with care. The repetitive rhythms, once pressing and urgent, now feel meditative. The subtle music of movement and attention softening into a slow hum that reverberates gently through your awareness. You probably won't survive medieval life without muscle and stamina. But tonight, in imagination, you inhabit the calm aftermath of it all. The mind relaxes further as you imagine the household fully at rest, the animals tucked in their pens, the children asleep or curled beside the hearth, and the faint glow of embers keeping time with the quiet pulse of evening. Small, quirky memories linger: a neighbor's peculiar superstition, the soft hum of a market chant, a child's innocent mischief. But even these drift in like gentle currents, adding warmth to the reflective quiet rather than pulling attention. Historians still argue whether such domestic routines empowered or constrained medieval women. But for you, lying here in imagined comfort, the answer is clear. These labors were a profound exercise of endurance, observation, and subtle artistry, a quiet mastery of daily life. The tactile impressions continue to soften as you focus inward. Fingers remember the weight of baskets, hands the coarse texture of straw, arms the effort of lifting water, shoulders the push and pull of fences. The mind relaxes in tandem, recognizing the body's own memory of movement, the harmony of task and muscle. Breathing deepens, slow and measured, the gentle hum of your own circulation, a comforting background rhythm. The night envelops you, shadows dissolving into stillness. And your awareness contracts to the warmth of the room, the soft texture of linens, the faint scent of herbs, and the lingering glow of firelight. You imagine the first light of morning filtered through dewy leaves and the soft stir of the household. But it remains distant, gentle, non-demanding. In this moment, there is only presence, the awareness of effort completed, muscles soothed, mind quieted, and rhythm restored. Tiny, quirky thought serves under pillows, whispers of household spirits, or faint echoes of market chants appear briefly, then dissolve, companions rather than demands. The imagination floats between sensory recall and reflective calm, a liminal space between labor and rest, between the rhythm of daily survival and the quiet of night. Finally, the last threads of awareness loosen. The warmth of the hearth, the coolness of night air through a half-open window, the muted rustle of the trees, and the gentle pulse of your own heartbeat merge into a lullaby of stillness. Your body surrenders fully, mind and muscles harmonized, a slow, steady sigh marking the transition from activity to rest. The echoes of the day, the tactile, olfactory, auditory imprints linger just enough to comfort, but not to demand. You are safe, prepared, and at peace. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let the quiet of medieval labor dissolve gently into sleep. Each breath a final echo of endurance, skill, and care.